Hello, Mr. Urino, can
Urino,
you?
can you? Yes, I'm good. How are you?
Apologies, I was having trouble here with the computer. I don't know what was going on, but I had to reset everything, so my apologies.
Oh, not a problem at all. Thank you very much. And I see we have a number of people who are waiting. So I'm going to go ahead and start because it's a little after 6. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's public hearing. My name is John Urino. I'm the zoning examiner for the city of Tucson. I conduct rezoning hearings on behalf of the mayor and council and make findings of fact, which I put into a written report along with my recommendation, which I then send along to the mayor and council for their consideration and for their final decision. My report will be based on the information submitted to me, which includes the rezoning application, the staff report, all written approvals and protests, all correspondence, and the testimony given at tonight's public hearing. I will also include in the record all documents submitted to me up to the close of the public hearing. Tonight's public hearing is being recorded and it'll be posted on the Planning and Development Services website after the close of the hearing. If you do choose to testify tonight, and I welcome anyone who wishes to testify to go ahead and speak, I would ask you please to speak clearly and to begin your testimony by stating your name and your address. Here's how the process works. First, I complete a preliminary report within 5 working days after the close of the public hearing. Then I prepare a final report. The final report will be issued 2 weeks after the close of the public hearing. For those of you who wish to receive a copy of the preliminary report and are not a listed party on the case, please send an email to tucsonrezoning@tucsonaz.gov. Again, tucsonrezoning@tucsonaz.gov, or call Planning and Development Services Department. A copy of my final report will be available from the Planning and Development Services Department, and I send the final report to the mayor and council. At the scheduled public hearing on the case, the mayor and council will then vote on the matter based on my recommendation, along with other factors. Tonight's public hearing will proceed in the following manner. I will open the public hearing and ask a representative of the Planning and Development Services Department to give a brief presentation of the case. After that, I will ask the applicant to make his or her presentation. I will then ask to hear from anyone in the audience who wishes to speak. I would ask that you please wait for me to call on you to testify so we will have a clear record. And if you're not speaking, I would ask you to mute your device because sometimes there's a lot of feedback if multiple people have their microphones open and are not speaking. Since I cannot have any communication with anyone involved in the case outside of this public hearing, I would invite you to speak tonight if you would like to do so. After everyone in attendance has had an opportunity to speak, I will offer the applicant the chance to respond to any of the concerns or issues that were brought up in other testimony. We have 3 cases on the docket for this evening's hearing. The first is case TPMOD 1223-000031 East Wetmore and First Avenue. Mr. Pazzo, you're presenting the staff report on that case?
I am.
Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. This is a major modification request by Lazarus and Sylvan on behalf of the property owner, Tucson Place Investors, to expand and reconfigure an existing Walmart, which is located within the Tucson Place Shopping Center. The proposal is located at the northwest corner of Wetmore Road and First Avenue. The applicant team held an in-person neighborhood meeting at 6 p.m. on December 20th, 2023. The existing shopping center is currently zoned C3 commercial, which was established with the rezoning and development plan submitted in the 1980s. As a result, the proposed expansion qualifies as a major modification to development plan and conditions. The preliminary development plan modification will increase the existing Walmart store from 95,000 square feet to 171,000 square feet, by reconfiguring the smaller retail stores towards the east and by developing the rear of the property. The expansion will also create an access lane between the expanded Walmart area and the existing retail stores. The preliminary development plan also includes landscape improvements within the shopping center, parking areas, and along the west Wetmore frontage road. The proposed major change to the development plan is appropriate for this location and is compatible with the surrounding land uses. The proposal is also in compliance with Plan Tucson and the Northstone Neighborhood Plan. Subject to compliance with the attached preliminary conditions, approval of the modified preliminary development plan within C3 is appropriate. As of today, there are 5 approvals and 0 protests recorded. Based off plan policy and the criteria of the Unified Development Code, staff supports this major modification request within C3 zoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paz. Is the applicant present and would you like to be heard?
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Urino. This is Rory Juneman with Lazarus and Sylvan, 5983 East Grant Road. We represent Walmart in this case, but we've also worked a lot with Larson Baker. Walmart's the tenant and Larson Baker owns Tucson Place. I would like to ask, I've just checked, I don't think I can share slides yet, so Sam or Gabriel, you may need to turn that on. So first I'd like to just start and introduce a couple of folks who are with us both in person and online. From Walmart is Jack Carver, Matt Smith, and Phil Sergini. And then from Larson Baker with us here is Melissa Law. So Mr. Urino, are you okay if I share some slides?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead, Mr. Juman.
And it's still giving me the host disabled screen sharing.
Okay, Mr. Paz or Ms. Gayoso, could you work on that, please?
So, and I can give kind of a start off and give an overview.
I'm trying, just give me a second, Rory.
Okay, no problem. I'll be patient.
You know, the city's updating the internet system as we're speaking. So I wonder if that was the issue, was having so much trouble. I'm trying to find the Lazarus and Sylvan. I see you now. Oh.
Yep, yep.
Okay, did that work?
Perfect, yeah, thank you. Mr. Urino, can you see our slides?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So the property that we're requesting this expansion is called the Tucson Place Shopping Center. It's at the northwest corner of First Avenue and Wetmore. It's zoned C3 and it's part of really a pretty vibrant commercial and mixed use area. That C3 zoning extends a little bit east of First, all the way over through Tucson Mall to the Oracle corridor. And within that is a lot of different uses, some multifamily, office, and a lot of commercial and restaurants, especially on this property. To our north is the Rito River and the Huckleberry Loop. There's about 400 feet of from bank to bank to the river, so that creates a nice buffer to the residential that's to the north. And then to the south of Tucson Place is another mix of uses, a little less intense, some office and hotel. Amphi has a JTED campus there, and then there's some medium density residential to our south. This area was really created in a 1982 annexation and rezoning. This map we're showing you is the annexation area that happened in 82. And with that original zoning, back then, the zoning districts could change in original zoning. While when Tucson Place was in the county, it was actually an I2 zone, and it was changed in the zoning to what is now C3. Part of that zoning required a concept plan to be developed for the center, and then once that concept plan was developed, then development plan would need to be approved that essentially effectuated that rezoning and matched what was in the concept plan. In 1988 and 90, the then owner processed a series of development plans that essentially established Tucson Place. Walmart was in the first phase of that, and by middle of 1989, that Walmart had opened. The history here is important because of the next thing on the slide. The 1999 big box ordinance was adopted by mayor and council. And as you are aware, the big box ordinance applies to retail establishments of 100,000 square feet or more. And if you fall into that category, then there's specific development design standards that apply. We're proposing a retail establishment that's over 100,000 square feet, but back in 1999, mayor and council included some exceptions to this ordinance, and we're utilizing one of those for this approval. That exception essentially said that the large retail establishment ordinance development standards and design standards don't apply if our request is a deviation from an existing approved development package that was required by mayor and council in conjunction with the rezoning. And that's exactly what we have here. We're asking to modify the 1988 development package of phase 1 in particular. And that 88 development package was a requirement from the 82 rezoning. So we verified this with the zoning administrator. And then because we fit in that category, and we can go to mayor and council to approve the application. And this exception really makes sense for properties like ours, which were developed prior to that 1999 ordinance. We can't likely meet all of the requirements, although we've shown in our application we meet a lot of them. But for an existing commercial center that is operated for, in this case, over 3 decades, and operated successfully and without impacting those neighborhoods around us, using this exception, I think, makes sense. I also wanted to point out that this process doesn't require us to come to you, but and actually staff sort of gave us the go ahead to go straight to mayor and council, but we wanted to come to you and kind of get your input on this application before we went to mayor and council. So a little bit about the store. It opened, as I mentioned, in '89, and it was really the original anchor of Tucson Place. It's 95,000 square feet. That includes a garden center. So under roof, it's around 88,000 square feet. It's a Division I store in the Walmart nomenclature. In the 90s, Walmart started moving away from these Division I stores and moving more towards super centers that include both, the full retail goods and grocery. Now there's actually just 2 Division I stores left in Arizona, this store and one in Flagstaff. And Walmart really likes this area, likes the center, and they want to stay, and they want to actually expand into a super center. In addition, Larson Baker, who is the landlord and the property owner, they see this as an opportunity, if this expansion occurs, to actually improve Tucson Place, do some renovations. If you've been in this Walmart store, it looks like it's over 3 decades old, and it needs some attention and some improvements. And really, both Walmart and Larson Baker want to take this opportunity to make the store better and to make the center better. So I want to walk through kind of what we're proposing. This is the current configuration of Tucson Place. The orange is the current Walmart. In yellow are the areas of the center that are going to be changed if we get this approval. That includes Famous Footwear and Office Max that are currently there. Those leases are ending, and they'll be leaving the center. between the Famous Footwear and the Walmart, there's some smaller tenants. Those are gonna be relocated within Tucson Place, so they're really not gonna see, other than a move, much disruption. But what this area does, what the area in yellow does, is allow Walmart to expand. So the areas in yellow will be demolished, and Walmart will expand mostly to the east, a little bit to the north where there's some extra space, but most of the expansion will occur to the east. And then there'll be a gap between the Walmart and the Best Buy. This expansion will take the Walmart to 171,000 square feet, but we're also removing almost 49,000 square feet of existing tenant space. So the actual expansion is only a little over 27,000 square feet. The space between the Walmart and the Best Buy, which the Best Buy and everything to the east of that is going to remain as it is. That area will be used as an access way and parking primarily for online order pickup. So just sort of showing the math on this, or the total expansion when you take both the area that we're removing and the area that we're adding, it's a little under 10% total expansion. So really that should mitigate any of the impacts of the expansion, things like traffic and parking, which I'll walk through here in just a minute. This is a landscape site plan. Just want to talk a little bit about the functionality of this store, if it's expanded, once it's expanded. Really, for the most part, the site will function very similar to what it does today. The store location is the same. The parking area is just to the south. The circulation, vehicle circulation will be pretty much identical to what it is today. The biggest changes are going to be the parking area between the Best Buy and the Walmart, which I mentioned will be online order pickup. That's really an ideal location for it because it's a safe place for employees to go to and from the car and into the building and make those deliveries, and a safe place for the customers that have placed those orders kind of away from the other parking areas. The other big change here will be that with the expansion, Walmart will offer full groceries in addition to the other goods and services that they offer. And they will also have things like a vision center and more wellness services within the building than they have today. But really, from an operational standpoint, not a lot is going to change. What the biggest change to the property is going to be in the parking lot. With the expansion, that 27,000 square foot area, we're required by the UDC to provide additional parking for that area, and with that, additional landscape trees. But the amount of trees for that area is only about 23 trees. We've worked with Ward 3 and had some meetings with them, and one thing that they were very clear about is that they wanted to see for more trees in the parking lot. And so we've worked with Walmart and worked with Larson Baker to do just that. On the Walmart side alone, we're going to double our parking lot trees from 23 to 46, and then Larson Baker will also, on outside of the Walmart lease area, is going to provide another 23 or more trees. So that brings us up to around 70 new trees within the parking area. We've also worked with staff to try to get those trees out where they really make the most sense. Putting them in the area between the buildings where the new parking is doesn't really make a lot of sense, because that area is going to be shaded by the buildings for large portions of the day anyways. This Walmart was built in the late 80s, and when parking trees weren't a requirement. So if you've been out there, you'll see that there aren't any trees within the parking area. There's a few in the landscaped areas, and what's out there will remain. But with this project, adding those 70 trees is gonna be really a significant improvement to the looks of that parking and will, once those trees are established and grown, they'll provide some much needed shade to the area. We've also worked with staff or with Ward 3 when we went out for a site visit with them, and they commented on the existing landscaping. So we committed to really coming up with a plant palette that really has more desert tree or desert plant focused. And this plant palette will not only be on the Walmart side, but will be throughout the Tucson Place Center with this expansion. So I think this is a nice improvement and will really make the parking lot in combination with the trees, make it look really nice. Couple other things that we're excited about are solar and electric vehicle charging. Walmart has committed to do rooftop solar on the project. It's not required, but we heard from Ward 3 that sustainability is important to them, and it really is just the right thing to do. So Walmart is including solar on the roof that will cover approximately twice the power that they use, so they'll oversize that. Obviously, we're going to comply with the EV charging ordinance, but Walmart is actually going above and beyond that. The ordinance requires level 2 chargers. Walmart is going to install some level 3 chargers that are quick chargers. So that's, again, above and beyond the code requirement, but it also is something that makes business sense because they hope to attract EV vehicle users who stop in. The charging takes about 20-30 minutes to fully charge. That's enough time for them to hopefully go into the store and shop. So it's it's above and beyond the code requirement, but it's also a good business thing that hopefully others will take note of. Traffic in the area, really, we don't think it's going to be impacted by this expansion for a few reasons. One, Tucson Place has 6 vehicle entrances, which is pretty unusual. 4 on Wetmore, 2 on First Avenue. There's also a substantial amount of monument signage to help direct people into the parking lot. So getting into the center is easy, and then once you're in the center, there's ample cross access and circulation between all the areas of the center. So circulation, I think, is really currently good and will remain that way after this expansion. And then when we look at the amount of trips that are going to be generated by this expansion, again, taking into consideration we're removing almost 50,000 square feet of floor area and having a relatively small 10% increase, that translates into just about an 8% increase in traffic specific to these uses. So that this 8% isn't for the entire center, it's for what we're replacing and what we're adding. When you look at the traffic for the entire center, it's more like about 3.5% additional traffic. So really the neighbors and the area around the businesses around really shouldn't see much if any additional traffic from this. From a parking standpoint, again, the development was from the late 80s when the parking requirements were 1 space per 200 square foot of floor area. Now those requirements are 1 to 300. So it really was a center that was built over parked, and that's going to stay the same. Even with our expansion, the Walmart, the spaces that are dedicated to Walmart are about 10% over the code requirement. And for the entire center, that's at about 19%. So there's plenty of parking spaces there. And so this expansion really won't have any impact on that. This is just a summary of kind of what we've gone through. I'm not going to go through this list. I do want to touch on something down at the bottom that I haven't mentioned, and that's Walmart's willingness to participate in funding for a hot crossing. This came from our neighborhood meeting in December. We had about 10 neighbors from the Limberlost Neighborhood Association there. And hopefully, I think there's a few that are gonna speak, but their feedback was generally positive. The one thing that they brought up is they've been trying to get a hot crossing that's directly south of the Walmart store at the, where Fourth Avenue connects to Wetmore. And, you know, this is something that we think would probably benefit the center, would benefit Walmart, allow, neighbors from that neighborhood an easier ability to cross Wetmore. Right now, they've either gotta cross sort of at their own risk at this area, or go down to Stone or First, which is a long way, so having this hop there would make it much easier for them to access the center. And again, we're willing to work with them and the city, and Walmart, and Larson Baker are willing to kind of work through this to see if we can help participate in that funding and help make that happen. The other thing that I think may not be obvious, but I think is important to just remember, that this expansion to a supercenter will allow this store to really remain viable, remain here for the long term, for the foreseeable future. And so that's something that we think is really important. I've also included just a few renderings of the store, what it'll look like in the future, but that's really it. I think I just want to conclude with the fact that this is a project that isn't just going to benefit the store. There's a lot of stakeholders that we think are going to benefit from this expansion. Obviously, the store is going to benefit from it, but its current customers and new customers will benefit from a nicer, newer shopping experience. The entire Tucson Place Center will, because again, if this expansion happens, that's going to be a catalyst for improvements to the entire Tucson Place Center, cosmetic improvements of the parking lot. But then the surrounding businesses and the neighborhoods will also benefit from it. So based on those reasons, we just respectfully request that you recommend approval, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Juniman, for your presentation. I don't have any questions at the present time. I would ask if anyone in the audience would like to be heard on this case. Usually the way we do this is just go ahead and speak up. I see someone put something in the chat. That's fine. Tamar Pixie Smith? Do I have that correct? I thought I did, but perhaps not. So if anyone would like to speak, just
Okay.
go ahead.
Is it okay? This is Mona White Ortega.
Thank you.
I live on Limberlost, North Limberlost Place. Do you need the house address?
Yeah, for the record,
Okay.
we do, but thank you so much.
4283 North Limberlost Place.
Thank you. Go right ahead.
And I really appreciated that the plans include for a hawk light. What I wanted to find out was it also going to include access to the loop from behind the store? Were they going to have some sort of path for us to access the loop? And then also, I'm size dumb when it comes to this. How large would you compare this Walmart to other Walmart supercenters in town?
Okay, so normally we'll have all the audience comments and then turn it back over to Mr. Juniman. But Rory, would you like to go ahead and address those two questions now?
Sure, Mr. Urino. Regarding loop access, there actually already is loop access at the north west corner of Tucson Place. So there's a current trail that goes and whether it's bike or pedestrian. So that'll remain, and I don't know that there's any plans for additional access, but there is currently access there. And then comparing the size, I know that the Walmart at the bridges at Tucson Marketplace down off of I-10 and Keno Parkway is about 100. I think it's around 160,000 square feet, and this will be very similar to that. I think This one, it's 171,000 square feet with a garden center, so it's really probably in the 164 range under roof. And it looks like there's one at, in Marana, it'll be smaller than the ones in Marana and Valencia, so kind of smaller than most, but still in that range, so.
Okay, thank you very much. And as far as the access to the loop, if there was just a small path for us to get to the parking area next to the Walmart, instead of having to go out to the transit center and come back around. That was my concern.
Yeah, it's not, Mr. Urena, sorry about.
No, go ahead.
Not at, let me, I can share my screen about that. I'll show you where it is instead of trying to describe it. So here, here's the Walmart. Here's the Walmart here at 4th Avenue. It's just south of here. The access point is just right here. So it's just on the west side of the Walmart. And again, that's an existing path. It's wide.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate your explaining everything.
Sure. My pleasure.
And thank you for your participation. Would anyone else in the audience like to be heard on this case?
I would like to.
Mr. Pacheco, go right ahead first, then we'll take the next person next. Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you. Me and Tamar Pixley Smith have been chatting about this for a while now. So I hope that I'm covering everything that she wanted to talk about too. But the main things we were concerned about, of course, were from the Limberlost neighborhood across the street, south from the complex. And of course, the main thing we're concerned about is that hawk light. I think it would just be irresponsible to go ahead and expand a center like that, a Walmart Supercenter. It would just be irresponsible to expand it without providing a way for people to easily walk there and walk back carrying the goods that they would have purchased from that store. And that goes, for bikes as well. So I think that the inclusion of that is a great step forward, and it shows not only that Walmart wants to expand and be a part of the city, but in a proactive way. So I like what you were saying there. The only other thing that we were concerned about too was the increase of traffic. I feel like we're eliminating a lot of stores and creating one bigger store. And that you say like there's going to be an overall 8% increase in traffic. But again, like the main issue that we're hoping for is that traffic can be controlled in a way that everybody can get there with that hawk light. So I think that helps us out in that direction there.
Okay.
I
Thank
think
you, Mr. Pacheco. And we'll go ahead and hear from everyone else in the audience who would like to be heard. And then I'll ask Mr. Juniman to address any points that he believes should be addressed. All right. So who else would like to be heard in the audience on this case?
This is Bill Kelly. Can I speak?
Mr. Kelly, go right ahead.
Thank you. So this is Bill Kelly with Diamond Ventures, 2200 East River Road. We own the office building at 800 East Wetmore, just to the east of this on the other side of First Avenue. And we think this is a great amenity for the area, and our office tenants will love it. So we are really excited about this coming forward. The idea of office people walking to work, not having to get in their car and walking to lunch and not having to get in their car. With all the amenities that are in that area, and now with this, it'll bring more amenities to the area, and I think it's a really good thing that the city of Tucson is going to do. And thank you to Larson Baker and Walmart for doing it.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you.
Would anyone else in the audience like to be heard? All right, I don't think so. Mr. Juniman, did you have anything else you'd like to say?
Mr. Union, I don't think Tamar Pixie Smith I know she was trying to speak, but maybe her microphone doesn't work.
All right, Mr. Pacheco indicated he had covered her comments, but Ms. Bickley Smith, would you like to go ahead and speak? I think not.
Well, so I think she's having technical difficulties, but that's okay.
All right. Well-
I don't think there's anything to respond to. Mr. Pacheco mentioned the hot light, and like I said, that's something that we're gonna dedicate some time to working with the neighborhood association, Ward 3, see what we can do to make that feasible. So.
All right, well, thank you very much, and I'm going to close the public hearing on case TP MOD 1223-000031, and thank you very much. So our next case, we have two more cases, but they're related. So I'm going to go ahead and explain that for a minute and then call the first one of them. So for everyone in the audience, there are two cases and they're related. The first is the original city zoning adoption, and the second is a requested amendment to the H2K pad. Just very briefly, when land is annexed into the city of Tucson from the county, there is a procedure to establish original city zoning that is translated zoning, meaning the city zoning that is no more intensive than and most like the existing county zoning is first put into place. So I'll first call that original city zoning case number in just a minute. And then separate from that, there's been a request on those same properties for those properties to be added to the existing H2K pad or planned area development that's already in the area by way of an amendment to that pad document. So with that very, very brief kind of overview of what the process is here, I'll call the two cases. The first case is TPENT 0124-00003, Cody, Gabriel, and Jay Annexation District's original city zoning. Then the related pad amendment case is case TPMOD 0623-000018, H2K pad major amendment. Mr. Slater, are you going to present the staff reports?
Yes, I am.
Please
So
go
this
ahead.
is a short request to rezone. It's an application by the city of Tucson to establish original city zoning on some recently annexed parcels in the area between Colossal Cave, Houghton, and north of I-10. So you've gone over the Arizona revised statute. City or town annexing area shall adopt zoning classifications at permit densities and uses no greater than those permitted by the county immediately before annexation. And the applicable zoning standards and land annexed into the city, unless otherwise stipulated in the annexation ordinance, shall continue to be the county standards applicable to the property prior to annexation until they're replaced by city standards, which the original city zoning translation does. So the procedure is to translate the zoning that is in place before the annexation to the most appropriate city zoning classification. And the applicant is requesting to establish original city zoning for some annexed parcels with a total area of 302 acres. The applicant held a required neighborhood meeting on January 17th, 2024 to discuss the original city zoning as well as the related modification to the H2K pad. 13 people attended the meeting. There were no questions concerning the original city zoning component of these two cases. The Planning and Development Services Department recommends approval of the I2 and RH zoning to establish the original city zoning and the addition of segments of Colossal Cave Road to the major streets and routes overlay where it crosses the original city zoning area designated as an arterial scenic road subject to the pre-annexation development agreement between the applicant and the city of Tucson. Some background on the case. The Cody, Gabriel, and Jay annexation districts represent about 302 acres of real property, and they're located adjacent to the existing 2,160 acre H2K pad, which was approved by Mayor and Council in 2022. Cody is located over on the east side of the pad, on the west side of Colossal Cave Road, there's like an elementary school there. Gabriel is located at the southern tip of the pad, at the northwest corner of Colossal Cave Road and I-10. And J is located at the northwest area of the pad. It's east of Houghton Road and adjacent to the Cactus Country RV Resort. And they're undeveloped and they're within the obligated water service area for Tucson Water. The public hearing for the annexation was held on May 23rd, 2023. And at the close of the public hearing, Mayor and Council directed staff to proceed with the annexation. They're owned by Arizona State Land Department. Arizona State Land believes the annexation is beneficial as it will increase acreage of the contiguous area of industrial land in order to assist in attracting potential projects that can contribute to the Tucson economic and employment base. The annexed parcels with some details in the modification case will contribute to a sort of a buffer area between the H2K pads uses and the adjacent residential neighborhoods and the elementary school on Colossal Cave Road. The current uses, they're entirely vacant land, and the zoning translations for these are we have the rural homestead, which is a county zone, which translates to rural homestead city zoning. They're called the same thing. One's county, one's city. There's a county CI2 zone, which is named general industrial. And the city I2 zone is called heavy industrial, which just wanted to cover the difference between like a rural general industrial zoning classification versus like an urban heavy industrial classification. It sounds like the opposite, but some of the uses that would be allowed in like a rural CI2 zone just by right are things like a salt works or like rendering fats for soaps, hazardous materials. Whereas city I2, even though it's called heavy industrial, the zoning classification allows for uses that would be more appropriate in an urban industrial context and not, in far-flung county areas. And then the major streets and routes plan, the county calls that a medium volume arterial of 150 feet. The city translation would be an arterial scenic, 150 feet as well. Plan policies aren't applied to original city zonings, and any future rezoning request must be in conformance with adopted land use plans. So consistent with the Arizona State Statute and the Unified Development Code, the city's translation of zones provided above are the most comparable to the Pima County zones and do not permit densities and uses greater than those permitted by the county. Translation to the city zones with conditions to reflect pre-annexation and development agreements between City of Tucson and the applicant as recommended is the appropriate translation from Pima County zoning to City of Tucson zoning.
I just had two questions, Mr. Slater, if I may.
Yep.
So the J parcel is the one to the north, is that correct?
That is correct.
And that is what is now county CI2 industrial zoned, correct?
Yeah.
And
So
the
if I wanted to
translation-
open like a salt works there, currently I could do it.
And the translation zoning is I2 for that parcel, correct?
Yeah. I2.
And the Cody and Gabriel parcels are the ones to the south, correct?
Yes.
And they are both
Cody is
county.
around the elementary school, and that one is suburban home.
They are both, excuse me, may I finish my question, please?
Of course, sorry.
Sure. And they are both currently zoned county RH, correct?
Yes,
And they would be translated to city RH.
that's correct.
Thank you very much. Would you like to present the staff report on the PAD amendment as well, sir?
Yeah, I can do it that way. So the PAD amendment is a request by WLB Group and Lazarus and Sylvan assisting the Arizona State Land Department for a major change to the H2K pad. It's proposed to add 3 annexed areas named Cody, Gabriel, and Jay
Go ahead,
to the
sir.
pad area and add some buffering requirements to the areas adjacent to Acacia Elementary School and Cactus Country RV Park. Background on the pad, 2,160 acre industrial campus. It was authorized in 2022. And the modification request adding areas Cody, Gabriel, and Jay would add approximately 302 acres to the pad area. The additional areas would be subject to the development standards already established in the H2K pad. including scenic corridor zone requirements along Houghton and Colossal Cave roads. All manufacturing activities will take place indoors, and loading areas will all be screened from view. The modification also enacts new development standards in the vicinity of Acacia Elementary School and Cactus Country RV Park. The area west and south of Acacia Elementary School to 400 feet, and the area 900 to 1,000 feet to the Julian Wash open space corridor north of that school shall be restricted to 40 feet in height, and uses from the industrial land use group on the Park Industrial and I-1 zones shall be prohibited. The areas 300 feet east, 400 feet south, and 400 feet west around Cactus Country RV will also be development restricted to the same standards. And Exhibit R of the PAD document details the location of those permitted use buffers and height restricted areas. Now, within those larger buffer areas, there shall also be a 50-foot natural undisturbed space area surrounding both the Acacia Elementary School and Cactus Country RV Park. And on the H2K pad side of that undisturbed open space area, a minimum 5 foot tall is required. Should the RV park no longer be in operation, the development restricted buffer will no longer be required around that RV park site. Planning and Development Services recommends approval of the major change to the H2K pad. So background information on the case: the existing land use is vacant. The zoning description for pad is pads are designed to encourage comprehensively planned development in accordance with adopted plans and policies. And they are used to provide for the establishment of a zoning district with distinct standards. Previous cases on the property, C9 21-23 is the H2K pad, which was effectuated in May 2022. Related case to this is the original city zoning case, which I introduced a moment ago, translating the county zoning to city zoning. The applicant's request is to amend the H2K pad to add 302 acres from Cody, Gabriel, and Jay, and establish those buffer areas. And plan policy is directed on in this area by Plan Tucson and the Rincon Southeast Sub-Regional Plan, as well as the Edmond Station Area Plan. In a Plan Tucson, this is identified as the Southlands building block. It's a long-term growth area formed by large tracts of undeveloped land. And a portion of the northwest corner of the H2K pad along Houghton is identified as business centers. The H2K pad is an effort to promote orderly phase development, reflecting sustainable and innovative community design. And this major modification is aligned with Plan Tucson goals. It also complies with the Rincon Southeast Sub-Regional Plan. The subject property on the land use map is shown as Community Activity Center, Medium High Intensity Urban, and Resource Conservation. So the expanded area, the riparian areas within the H2K pad and restricted development zones included in the modification are consistent with those land use categories. The Edmond Station Area Plan policy is to include ensured availability of adequate services and industrial developments compatible with surrounding uses, which the environmental and riparian setbacks and the setbacks and sensitivity to existing residential in the elementary school are compliant with that area plan. The consultant held a neighborhood meeting on January 7th, 2024 at 6 p.m. The meeting was located at the Empire High School in Vail, Arizona. The invitation was sent to all property owners within 400 feet of the pad area and all neighborhood associations within 1 mile of the pad using a city-generated mailing list. Additionally, all property owners within the adjacent Hanson Ridge subdivision were sent meeting invitations. It was attended by 20 neighboring property owners, 2 people from the Ward 4 office, and 5 project team members. Concerns were raised by attendees on future truck traffic and other traffic impacts. They also requested information about the noise control district line of the pad development unit plan. It was stated that the noise control district line related, it referred to a Davis-Monthan Air Force Base and Burns, and it wasn't related to the pad itself. Concern was expressed about the pad's proximity to Acacia Elementary School and the use of Trotter Sisters Road, which is used by children from that subdivision to walk to and from school. The applicant team outlined the development restricted restriction zones applied to that area, and the meeting alleviated that concern. Attendees also asked about hazardous materials manufacturing, and it was expressed that the H2K pad prohibits the manufacturing of such materials. There were questions on why some neighbors were not informed of the 2022 rezoning, which established the H2K pad. That rezoning occurred prior to the development of many of the Hanson Ridge subdivision homes, and so these neighbors would not have. The properties would have still been owned by the home builder, and they wouldn't have received the notice for that. And attendees asked about the 400-foot notification area, which the applicant team explained also included nearby neighborhood associations within a mile and the ward office for that part of the city. The notification area, again, was expanded to include the Hanson Ridge subdivision. Attendees expressed concern about impact of property values and negative impacts to the subdivision lots facing Julian Wash. It was explained Julian Wash will be preserved and enhanced with transplanted vegetation from development in other areas of the H2K pad. The wash itself varies in width from 350 to 2,000 feet, which also provides significant separation between development areas and residential uses. The Cactus Country RV Park manager expressed concerns about impacts to permanent seasonal residents. Those concerns were acknowledged by the team, who committed to a follow-up meeting with the property owner and general manager. Then the regulations were added, providing that buffering and development transition area around the RV park. General questions from attendees included the addressing of the pad, development timelines, and if some state land department property could be purchased for expansion of the school site. It was explained the school district is aware of the process with ASLD to purchase at least property, and Arizona State Land committed to further discussion on this issue with the school district. So the applicant's request increases the size of the pad area consistent with plan policy while also providing development restricted zones around existing residential and civic use areas. The proposed major change is consistent with and supported by the policy direction provided by Plan Tucson and the Rincon Southeast Subregional Plan, and the expansion and restrictions. They meet the intent of the H2K pad, and approval of the major change is appropriate. And then in the report, there are a couple of conditions that were requested from Historic and the Arizona Department of Transportation. So for both of these cases, we received a number of protests and a couple of approvals. For the original city zoning case, we received 22 protests and no approvals. 4 of those were from outside 150 feet of the pad boundary. 15 of those were within 150 feet. And then for the H2K pad, for the modification of the pad, there were 23 protests and 2 approvals. We received letters of support from the Vail Area Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Vail School District. 15 of those protests were within 150 feet of the rezoning area or the modification area, and 4 of those protests were from outside that area. Additionally, the Sonoran Desert Conservation, the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection recommended some additional conditions to the applicant team, which the applicant team has agreed to incorporate into the pad document. I think that's it for my intro for the case.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Slater. Would the applicant like to be heard?
Good evening, Mr. Urino. This is Carrie Sylvan with Lazarus and Sylvan, representing the Arizona State Land Department. With me is Karen Dada, who is the Assistant Director for the Real Estate Division for the State Land Department, and Rob Longacre from WLB Group. And we were going to go ahead. I'm going to share my screen with your permission. We're talking about the PAD. I know Mike Chakowski is on the line from the city as well to deal with the original city zoning. I assume you'd like me to go ahead and proceed if there are questions to that.
Sure. Mr. Chakowski, did you want to be heard on the original city zoning, sir?
No, thank you, Mr. Urino. I think it's all been covered. Thank you.
Thank you. So Ms. Sylvan, go right ahead then on the PAD piece.
Sorry. All right. Are you seeing the presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So thank you again for having us this evening. I'm going to give you sort of a brief explanation of state land. Rob is going to go through and highlight some of the provisions in the PAD, both that exist already as well as are tied to the 3 annexation pieces. And then I'm going to come back and give a little bit of a description about our public engagement throughout this process. So with that, state land, as the Arizona State Land Department, as many people know, is trustee of over 9 million acres of land throughout the state of Arizona that it manages for 13 specific beneficiaries, primarily the education system. These lands were set aside at statehood to help fund our state's essential public services, with the Arizona State Land Department created to manage the lands on behalf of the beneficiaries as a trustee. The white and the blue areas on this map are really the only areas in the state of Arizona available for economic development. The white are the private lands and the blue are the state lands. The rest are otherwise encumbered federal, state, other types, military, other types of lands. State land is not public land. It's not open space or otherwise set aside. It's held, leased, and or sold on behalf of the beneficiaries. As trustee, the State Land Department job is to generate income for the beneficiaries with these lands. The rules governing how Arizona State Land Department manages the lands are all established in Arizona's Enabling Act, as well as the Constitution and the state statutes. The purpose, as I said, as the trustee, is for the beneficiaries, and they must maximize the value for the beneficiaries. These are a lot of the beneficiaries are K-12 public lands. As I said in many of the neighborhood meetings, you go on the State Land Department website, every single piece of land is actually tied to a beneficiary, and you can click on the map and see that. It also includes other public services and institutions. We have a significant amount of state land in southern Arizona, and our communities are growing into that land. The existing 2,100 acres that is the H2K PAD right now in the city is already zoned for the light industrial. The reason state land focused on this property and worked with the city in 2021 and 2022 to zone this area is because it's really unique from that economic development standpoint. It's the only piece of property in the state of Arizona that has access to both rail and the freeway. The Houghton Road interchange had just been completed. The size of the land and the physical characteristics of the land. These 3 annexation pieces were always intended to be part of the H2K PAD. There was a need at that time to move forward. There was a potential user at that time. So we moved forward ahead of the annexation. In Arizona, state land annexation has to be permitted by a selection board, which is made up of the governor, the treasurer, and the attorney general of the state. So that decision was made by that group right before the PAD was approved in 2022, and we began the process of talking to the city then about annexing and moving this forward as well. So we proceeded with the original H2K PAD again because there was a potential user, and now we're catching up with these 3 parcels. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob to go through the PAD. Oh, I missed a slide, but I already spoke to it. There you go.
I got it. Thank you, Carrie. Rob Longacre from WLB Group. Thanks to Gabriel for doing a thorough presentation. He's covered actually quite a bit of the information that I was going to cover. So I'm going to ad lib here a little bit and remove portions of my presentation so I'm not duplicating information. But this map, just want to touch on it for a moment. This exhibit is showing a couple things. One, the blue area is the existing 2,160 acres that is part of the original H2K PAD, rezoned, of course, in 2022, allowed for park industrial and light industrial uses. And then you can see the 3 proposed annexation areas proposed for addition to the H2K are shown in orange. And then I also want to touch for a moment on notification. We did expand, as Gabriel mentioned, our notification area based on the input we received from surrounding property owners to include all of the owners within the Hanson Ridge subdivisions. Let me spend a moment just talking about the types of uses that are permitted and that are not permitted in the H2K PAD. And just mentioned a moment ago, it permits uses in the city of Tucson Park industrial and light industrial zones only. It permits manufacturing and primary manufacturing only if within enclosed buildings. And just to make this point clear, no heavy industrial or manufacturing of hazardous materials is permitted within this PAD. The PAD also allows for other uses such as commercial, restaurants, hotels, retail, etc. And then Gabriel mentioned this in his presentation. We are eliminating the ability to do heavy industrial in the northern annexation area, the J annexation area, which is currently zoned, as mentioned before, CI2 in Pima County. We've also in the PAD included provision to allow for a 10 to 15 acre public safety facility if needed. Exact location to be determined. This is something that was born out of input that we received from the larger community. There's also mentioned in the staff report about the restricted use areas around the Acacia Elementary School and the Cactus Country RV Park. We did work closely with these property owners to design these buffer areas, restriction of use areas. I'll talk a little bit more about these in a moment. There are 40 uses that are specifically prohibited from the PAD as a result of the original rezoning process, and they are railroad switching yard, hazardous material manufacturing, and any other I2 use, billboards, and cannabis cultivation. Many people have asked us for a picture of what this project may look like, so these are images from other similar industrial projects around the state of Arizona. They give you an idea of how this may look. And please note that in the upper left-hand corner is the U of A Tech Park. All right, let's spend a few moments on the development unit plan. This exhibit is showing the entirety of the H2K PAD in addition to, of course, the 3 areas proposed for addition. Point out a few key features of the plan. Of course, the orange areas, the areas outlined in orange, those are the annexation areas. The green area that you see, that is what we call the Julian Wash Open Space Corridor. And this is actually part of a unique program in this PAD, which focuses on preservation and enhancement of the Julian Wash Corridor. I should also mention that it provides a significant buffer between future industrial uses and in most particular, the Hanson Ridge subdivisions to the north. The width of this buffer varies from approximately 300 feet to 2,000 feet. I mentioned a moment ago the restricted areas around the Cactus Country RV Park and the Acacia Elementary School. You can see them on this exhibit, patched areas in orange. And Gabriel mentioned the restrictions, but they're important, so I'm just going to touch on them again. So around the Acacia Elementary School, we originally had a 400-foot buffer around the south, west, and north sides of the school. Based on public input, we've expanded that to include additional area to the north. That area is now approximately 900 to 1,000 feet wide on the north side of the school. We heard concerns about school-age children walking to Acacia Elementary School on Trotter Sisters Road, concerns about walking through industrial areas. That will no longer be the case because of these restricted areas. Only commercial uses are permitted in that buffer. Height is limited to 40 feet. And then Gabriel mentioned the 50-foot natural undisturbed area adjacent to the school and the 5-foot wall on the H2K side of the area. Cactus Country RV Park, very similar mechanisms in place. 400-foot buffer on the west and the south, 300 feet on the east, I'll mention why it's 300 feet on the east and not 400. It has to do with the potential for a rail spur coming into the site. If 300 feet would allow for that rail spur to enter the site, 400 feet would restrict it. There's very specific standards with radii regarding the rail spur, so that's the reason for the 300 feet in that area. Same thing, limiting uses to commercial only, height limited to 40 feet, and the same 50-foot natural buffer and wall will also apply to this area. The other things you're seeing on this plan of major significance, the approximate west of a third of the property is within the approach departure corridor 3 for Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. It's in place to protect the Air Force Base. The PAD complies with ADC 3 regulations in the EDC, with exceptions of a few modifications made in discussion with and agreed upon by Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. And then there's a red dash line in the very northwestern corner of the PAD. That is what's called Noise Control District A. PAD complies with the EDC regulations addressing noise attenuation and prohibited uses within this zone. Development standards for the PAD. The existing development standards include the following: Houghton Road and Colossal Cave Road scenic corridor zone requirements, such as 30-foot landscape buffer adjacent to the road, height reduced to 30 feet within 400 feet. All manufacturing must be indoors. Loading must be either indoors or include 6-foot solid screen wall around the area and be located as far from residential as possible. Overall height of the PAD maximum height 140 feet, 200 feet for non-habitable structures. This amendment includes new standards. One is the permitted use buffer and height restriction area we already discussed around the Acacia Elementary School and Cactus Country RV Park. And then also mentioned in the staff report, we had recent dialogue with the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection. We have made some edits to the document. They have been outlined in the PAD text. It's the same additional text that was identified in the April 14th letter sent to you, Mr. Reno, by Carol Campbell. These changes provide additional development standards related specifically to the Julian Wash. Wherever possible, we use the existing UDC regulations in the PAD. This includes the UDC use-specific standards. The use-specific standards in the UDC serve as the basis for use-specific standards in the PAD, and the intent of these standards is to mitigate potentially adverse impacts on adjacent land uses, on the immediate neighborhood, and on the community. The standards that apply are the ones that are shown on the screen. Another unique part of the PAD is what we call the Agua Verde Creek Open Space Preservation Plan. The purpose of this plan is to allow for mitigation of riparian areas within the H2K PAD that will be disturbed. It provides a distinct opportunity to preserve valuable areas for open space preservation in the Agua Verde Creek corridor. And what this map is showing, the gray areas are already lands designated for such within the PAD. The yellow areas are proposed for addition based on this amendment. And the pink salmon colored areas are actually existing Pima County mitigation lands. And last thing before I turn it back over to Carrie is that yet another unique aspect of this PAD is what we call secondary planning. This is an acknowledgement that planning doesn't stop when zoning is approved. All these items that are shown on the screen must be addressed by future users during the development package stage. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Carrie.
Last couple of slides. Rob already talked about the first round of the PAD. We worked with a number of stakeholders and added some prohibited uses. We also added the environmental mitigation, some billboard commitments. We worked very closely with Davis-Monthan at that time. And one other key thing that's in the PAD and continues to be in the PAD is a commitment that 10 to 15 acres can be set aside if the city desires for public safety facilities or other municipal services. So we did a lot of stakeholder engagement prior to even anything on this slide. In July of 2023, right as mayor and council initiated this annexation, there was a public hearing, and it became clear that there was a lot of confusion. The incorporation was kicking up at that time. There were a lot of questions about how this was going to work, a lot of questions about the existing zoning. So we very quickly held a stakeholder meeting with a lot of the non-residential stakeholders in the area. It was at the chamber. It included the Vail Chamber, the Vail Preservation Society, the school district, state land, and the city of Tucson. We started discussions, and what became clear was we were being asked by folks to tap the brakes a little bit on this process. We were getting ready to have the neighborhood meeting and move forward, and the Vail School District wanted to have a separate meeting with us as well. So we did that in October, and that's where the beginning of that buffer that has been described now twice, so I won't describe it again, began. And we worked with the school district on that. Also in October, we followed up with the chamber, and state land did make a commitment to tap the brake pedal a little bit and not really start the public engagement, the official neighborhood meeting, until after the incorporation vote. So our official neighborhood meeting was on January 17th. Gabriel did a very thorough explanation of what was brought up in the neighborhood meeting and responses. We did meet after that meeting with the Cactus Country RV ownership, had some good discussions. They actually have an attorney in town, and so we worked together and again incorporated some of the buffer that we had negotiated with the Vail School District. Cactus Country RV is where we came up with the 50-foot natural buffer around with the wall on the H2K side. And then we turned around and talked to the school district about doing the same thing for Acacia. So those buffers are somewhat the same because we were working with both at the same time. As you know, the Vail School District has indicated their appreciation of all of that work and the buffer that we created for the school district. Use, height, and then that natural, and the Cactus Country RV ownership acknowledged that it's actually a down zoning near them, and they're very comfortable with that buffer. We then continued conversations with the chamber, and Rob already alluded to the conversations with the coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection, and both of those organizations have indicated support. This is a summary of the buffers and the additional mitigation that we worked with the coalition on. Unless you would like me to go over them, I believe both Gabriel and Rob have given you a good summary. I don't feel the need to read the slide, but I can answer any questions about that. And with that, we would respectfully request your recommendation to approve with the changes that were that we provided earlier this week, which align with the coalition letter as well, and the revised sewer map as well. And I'm happy to answer questions now. I'm happy to wait till after the public hearing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Longacre and Ms. Sylvan. I'm going to go ahead and ask for folks in the audience who want to speak first, and then I'll come back to you guys. First of all, for everyone in the audience, unfortunately, if you put things in the chat, it won't be part of the record. So I'm going to go ahead and call on Brandon Saxon. Would you mind speaking, sir, and communicating what you put in the chat so that we have a record of your comments or questions? Would you go ahead and start, sir?
Yeah, hi, everybody. So I was just wondering if there was a plan to the traffic at the Colossal Cave exit off of I-10 already during the rush hour times is pretty bad. We have to like exit from the shoulder, as somebody else pointed out. And so I was wondering if there was a plan to maybe mitigate that with the increased traffic that's probably going to result from industry moving into the area. Also, railroad traffic, if the industry is utilizing the railroad, I'm assuming they're going to be stopping there pretty more frequently, which is also an issue already, and I believe will be made worse.
Thank you, Mr. Saxon. What I'm going to do, and I apologize for the little bit cumbersome here, is I'm going to go ahead and have everyone in the audience who wants to speak they'll hear them. Ms. Sylvan and Mr. Longacre will, I'm certain, take notes on what's said and be able to respond to individual comments as appropriate for that. If that's okay, I appreciate that, Mr. Saxon, and I appreciate your question and your comment. We had a chat item from Caitlin, no last name, that's fine. Caitlin, if you're present and would like to speak, why don't you tell us your last name as well and then go right ahead? Perhaps not. So would anyone else in the audience like to be heard on this case?
I'd like to make a comment.
Go ahead, Joseph. Please state your name first for the record, then go right ahead.
My name is Joseph Dragon. Gabriel and I had been communicating a bit, and I had made a in writing inquiry. I'll start with my initial question that I had laid out. So, how is the subject case or cases in this situation, really the first case, intended to be executed in compliance with ours Title 9-471L, given the following information. So the current plan appears to be in violation and non-compliant with the R's, which is, quote, a city or town annexing an area shall adopt zoning classifications to permit densities and uses no greater than those permitted by the county immediately before annexation, end quote. And I know you guys brought that up at the beginning, so I appreciate that. The translation of Pima CI2 general industrial to Tucson I2 heavy industrial is a far greater use, which has the potential to inflict public harm, such that, to quote Tucson's own definition of I2, uses that are generally considered nuisances, air pollutants, excessive noise, or hazardous materials. I know that particular one has already been addressed, making them incompatible with most other land uses, end quote. The correct equivalent classification, if you look at them side by side, it's pretty black and white, is Tucson I1 light industrial. It's actually what the plan laid out in the H2K pad May 17, 2022 document recommends for all of the zones that fall in that category. In order to rezone as I2 heavy industrial, the equivalent county classification would have had to have been CI3 heavy industrial zone. So you can see how the numbering system there is a little bit funky and misleading. I wanted to know how this mistake occurred and how it would be remediated, and how would root cause and corrective action apply to ensure any historically annexed CI2 zoned land did not have the same improper zoning apply. And we had a bit of correspondence. One of the other big areas of concern that I had that caught my eye when I was reading through one of the documents that's posted as an attachment for tonight, the TPN 12403 for web and posting. It's got a pretty nice table there. It lays out pretty clearly that the CI2 zoning classification from Pima County has a height restriction limit of 54 feet. They're talking about 5 stories, right, in the building height. If we look at the heavy industrial classification, the maximum height is 140 feet. We're talking about 14 stories, and there's also the exception, which was brought up already, for a limit to be raised for non-residential buildings to 200 feet. We're talking 20-story buildings. So I'd really like to understand how that's going to be limited. I'd like to make a full objection, and I would propose that all the zoning for I2 be moved down to the appropriate I1 classification. This entire southeast sector is highly residential. Yes, this land is near the highway. I'm glad that it has a lot of value for the stakeholders. I hear that, and I hear maximize profit. I think this is an opportunity right now where what we should be doing is constraining the future potential developments so that hazardous and, nuisance type development that would harm the residents would be limited. So, thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. We have a number of hands up now. So Carolyn Campbell, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Iarino. This is Carolyn Campbell, and I'm with the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection. And you know, this is an industrial site, but we have been involved specifically because there are environmental resources that are present on this site. And we spoke with you and submitted a letter of support back in 2022 for the larger pad. And we have been working with WLB and Lazarus and Sylvan and the State Land Department. Again, with this 302 acres that is being added to the site, and particularly there are multiple protected riparian areas on site. Really, as you saw on the map, traversing the site, and particularly the Julian and Franco wash corridors. And so we have continued to work with them as we did before. One, supporting what Rob mentioned earlier, which is the offsite mitigation in a very important area of the Agua Verde Creek open space. The preservation plan that will be mitigated offsite, but in particular, at this point, we have worked with them, as was mentioned before, about development standards that will protect the washes, which also serve as wildlife corridors. And I won't go over the specific language unless you would like me to. It was in our letter and it's been added to the pad, but it specifically, we are hoping to allow drainage to flow from the area into the basins that are part of the protected riparian area mitigation in Julian and Franco washes, and provide open space areas and buffers that allow wildlife to continue to move through the wash corridors in this pad, discourage wildlife from entering industrial area, the development areas. And then we also dealt with them on issues of light trespass and noise trespass, that really affect wildlife in these areas. So with those conditions that we worked with them on, we can support this pad amendment modification. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. I do have your letter, and my understanding, and Mr. Longacre can confirm it or not, is that the applicant has agreed to the conditions stated in your letter, but we'll get to that when he speaks next. But thank you for your participation tonight.
Okay, thank you.
We have a hand up from Maurice A. Would you please go ahead and start by stating your full name and address, and then go right ahead and say what you'd like to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mr. Iarino. My name is Maurice AC. My address is 11116 South Wiseman. So I'm a homeowner right next to the H2K pad. I'm just seeking clarification from Gabrielle and Rob. There's been a lot of jargons going back and forth. This is not my speak. My understanding of the discussion is the Cody, the Gabriel, and the J are being added to the H2K pad, and that is not zoned as H2, I2 right now, heavy industrial. That is more along the lines of light industrial. Is that accurate?
Mr. Longacre will address that, but I think what you're saying is correct, but let's wait for him to address that after everyone else has had a chance to speak.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. The next is JJ. Please go ahead and state your name and address.
This is JJ Lamb. I live at 2954 East Cardenas Drive in Vail, Arizona. And I'm the president of the Vail Preservation Society. And my question really relates to Tucson as they're annexing these three additional, excuse me, areas to add to the H2K. One, we have communicated with Lazarus and Sylvan and W work-life balance. in the past. So it's unfortunate that we weren't able to really communicate in a way that made a difference for the historic resources. I would like to say that what's going to happen actually goes against Tucson's planning and zoning. In Plan Tucson 2013, one of the policies for the Houghton Corridor and Southlands specifically says protect historic and archaeological resource. So this landscape along Colossal Cave Road to the west is a virtually unchanged historic ranching landscape. It's been previously identified in earlier surveys that were related to transportation. It includes nationally, regionally, and local historical resources to include the Mormon Battalion's route, that's 1847. That is honored with the monument in Tucson, but it's the actual route itself is not going to be honored. And the 1858 Butterfield Overland Trail, which was designated by President Biden in 2023 as a national trail. Both of these significant historic resources remain currently, but will be obliterated by Tucson's plans for this area, instead of preserved, celebrated, and possibly a source of heritage tourism to Tucson and environs. I would also add that the transportation issues are going to impact Vail's two remaining historic buildings, the 1935 Shrine of Santa Rita in the Desert and the 1908 Old Vail Post Office, both of which are on the National Register, so they are significant. And I'll say that I'm Plan Tucson 2013 policies goal 4 for social environment. It really calls out that Tucson cares for the natural environment. And I'm pleased that there are some mitigations, but I'm not convinced that this plan will not severely impact the critical wildlife corridor that's identified in the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan. And thank you for hearing my comments and question.
Thank you, Ms. Lamb, for your participation. Mr. Humble, Keith Humble.
Yes, good evening. Thank you very much for letting me speak tonight. I live at 10893 South Alley Mountain Drive in Vail. And even though that we live in unincorporated Pima County, and this is a Tucson function that we're dealing with tonight, I just want to talk about the areas that these 3 annexations are going to affect the people in Vail. And that would be the Cody annexation and the Gabriel annexation, both on Colossal Cave. First of all, regarding Cody, I'd like to commend the developers for changing their buffer zone to 400 feet around the Acacia Elementary School. If we had our druthers out here, we wouldn't want that to be even developed at all, but we'll take whatever we can get. But right now, anybody that lives in Vail, our only access to I-10 is along Colossal Cave, which is 2-lane highway. And anybody that's been out there during parent drop off in the morning or pick up in the afternoon at Acacia School can see the backup of traffic at that time. And it's not just affecting the people in Vail, but everybody up the whole long length of Camino Loma Alta, all the way up to Spanish Trail, and then both ways in Spanish Trail, Copper Ridge and everything out there, and also the Rocking Cave, which is going to end up with I've understood to be 6,000 homes. That's just going to add to the more traffic coming down Colossal Cave to get to the freeway. And if I look at the original development of the H2K in itself, there's a main entrance and exit off of Houghton on the west end, and then another one at the east end at Colossal Cave. Between the two, the maps I've looked at, there's a public access road, option A, which connects those, which is along the freeway, which is along the existing freeway access right now, but another one that goes along the northern edge of the Rock H2K development closer to Hanson Ridge and the buffer zone between that and the Julian Wash area. And I would recommend, if this goes through and we have no other say-so, we need to eliminate that access from Colossal Cave because it's just going to add that much more traffic to it with delivery trucks and all of that. And the second question I have regarding this, and looking at the map on the H2K development, between development unit B and unit C, there is the approach departure corridor number 3. And I was wondering if that is with Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, or does that work with the Tucson International Airport? Because if it is with Davis-Monthan, one of the concerns I saw earlier, somebody said in H2K, there was a 140-foot height limit on structures. And I've seen planes from Davis-Monthan coming over our house a little bit lower than that. So I would hope that they're being aware of that. But mainly, my concern is the added traffic on Colossal Cave. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your participation, Mr. Palmer. We have a
Thank you.
hand up from Isaac. Would you go ahead and state your full name and address and then go right ahead, sir?
Hi, thank you. Yes, my name is Isaac Hung, and I own a house on 11144 South Wiseman Drive, which is within 150 feet of the H2K PAD boundary. And I would like to say that I fully concur with and endorse the statements made by Joseph, who had spoken earlier, and I would like to further expand on a few points that were made. The first one being the maximum allowable facility height of 140 feet. The community that I live in, which is Hanson Ridge, there is concern that these elevated facilities would allow direct line of sight from industrial and commercial facilities through windows or other aerial platforms directly into residential areas, generally treated as private spaces, such as backyards and open windows. And additionally, going on to the 2 nearby train crossings on Colossal Cave Road, these already create quite a significant noise nuisance since trains are required by federal law to sound their horns when they cross, even throughout the night when residents are trying to sleep. And as it's highly likely that manufacturing facilities located on the H2K PAD will utilize these railroad tracks and increase traffic, train traffic and associated nuisances, I believe that it would be beneficial to consider mitigations such as working with UPRR to fund improvements to convert these 2 railroad crossings on Colossal Cave Road into quiet zones. I know that has been done in several urban areas across the country. And then thirdly, to expand on the traffic issues on I-10 and the exit ramp on Colossal Cave Road. Practically speaking, I believe that the traffic capacity of this area is at capacity, and it sometimes exceeds during peak traffic conditions. And then during these peak traffic times, oftentimes it creates an excessive backup of traffic and creates dangerous traffic conditions, especially when traffic backs up into the highway's high-speed travel lanes. As some previous speakers have noted, that sometimes they even have to move off onto the shoulder of the highway in order to line up for the exit. So I believe if additional traffic is introduced through the development of either industrial or commercial developments, then there needs to be significant rework of the roads and traffic controls in the area to alleviate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac, for your participation. There are no more hands up, but if anyone else would like to speak, please go right ahead. All right, seeing no hands and hearing no one, Mr. Longacre or Ms. Sylvan, would you like to address any of the points raised by the members of the audience who spoke tonight?
We'll actually address all the points that were made by all the speakers. I'll start, go back and forth. So Brandon Saxton was the first speaker. He did mention traffic issues on Colossal Cave Road. We definitely respect with any project impacts to surrounding transportation systems. The PAD contains the special planning area, the mechanisms for secondary planning. One of the items that must be addressed during that stage is traffic. And then during the development package stage, when the plans are prepared to approve the site, that also requires a detailed traffic impact analysis. So if the project is causing burden on adjacent roadways due to its development, then those issues will need to be addressed. Improvements will need to be made. There was discussion about the railroad traffic, and I want to make sure it's clear that the project won't be bringing in, additional long trains that you see going through the area right now. What will happen is that smaller numbers of train cars, rail cars will be brought into the site on a potential rail spur. It's almost like an exit ramp off of a highway, and that will enter the site, and the materials will be loaded and unloaded, and then we'll get back to the main line. So I just want to make sure we were clear on how that was working. The next speaker was Joseph. He was talking about annexation, zoning translation issues. I think we're going to ask Mike Chakowski, if you would respond to that.
Rob, go ahead and finish your list, and then we'll circle back.
All right, let me address comments made by Carolyn Campbell. First off, I wanted to thank Carolyn and Chris McVie for working with us closely on this PAD, both during the original adoption of the PAD and the recent amendments. And I will say that the letter that Carolyn sent to you does contain the exact language that we did work out, and we have included in the PAD document.
Thank you. I thought so.
All right, gentlemen, Maurice, he would ask you about zoning. So this PAD does not allow heavy industrial zoning. It allowed for lighter industrial zoning districts, I-1 and Park Industrial. Mr. Keith Humble, he also mentioned traffic issues. Again, secondary planning and traffic impact analysis required development package will address those specific issues. He also mentioned approach departure corridor 3. And a couple things I'll point out with regard to that. We did have lengthy discussions with Davis Monthan, and it is in relation to the Air Force Base. And we specifically spoke with them about building heights, because there are limits to code within ADC 3. But they specifically agreed that heights of 140 feet, even 200 feet for non-habitable structures, would not negatively impact planes approaching the runway. I should point out also too that there are 3 ADC zones. This is the furthest from the runway. We're approximately 7 miles from the runway. So that's one of the reasons why the height is not as big a factor in the area in the East UK PAD. A gentleman named Isaac was talking about heights in the PAD. A few things to note regarding that. One of the reasons for the greater height has to do with robotics, which are used by industrial users. They require greater height inside the building in order to perform their operations. So that's the primary reason for the greater height. I would also point out that the heights we're talking about tonight are already in the existing H2K PAD and have already been approved. And then a couple of things one other thing about height is that based on buffers that are already established, particularly the Julian Wash buffer, it's creating significant separation between surrounding uses which will mitigate perception of height from surrounding properties. Let's see, he also mentioned rail traffic, I covered that. And that's it for me. I know Carrie has a few things to say.
I'm gonna just address, JJ Lamb. JJ, thank you for your comments. I know we've worked together on this, as, I think we've discussed in the past. The historic resources, particularly the post office and a few of the others, are not actually on the site. The post office, I think, is over a mile away. There are, some of those resources are definitely in the area, but there's nothing for us to put in the pad relative to dealing with them because they're not within the boundaries of the site. The state land department does have its own requirements to do cultural surveys and making sure that some of those issues are addressed. That again is independent of the PAD or any local regulation. That's the state regs. So with that, Mr. Urino, I was going to suggest, I know it's in the chat, but there was a question specifically about buffer to Hanson Ridge. Would you like us to address that?
Yes, if you would address that. And then also there was a question about the traffic plan generally. I think it would be helpful on that piece to bring up a map and walk through that. Before we go there though, if I may I?
Yes.
I may. Thank you. Before we go there, I want to address the point that Joseph made on the original city zoning in a very direct way. I tried to preview this with my opening remarks, but of course, opening remarks come before anyone has spoken, and it's not as clear. So let me just put it to you, Ms. Sylvan. The PAD, if the PAD is adopted, that replaces whatever original city zoning is put in place. Am I correct on that? You didn't hear me? Are you there?
Sorry, was that directed at us?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if the original city zoning, the translation zoning, if the PAD is adopted, that replaces the original city zoning.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes,
So
it does.
if there's a concern that original city zoning of I-2 will then result in there being development of all of the possible uses in I-2, that is not correct if the PAD is adopted. Am I right?
That is correct.
Instead, the uses would be governed by the PAD document, which Mr. Longacre described and showed us some nice graphics of other park industrial developments in the area that are nothing like heavy industrial development that might be possible under a zoning of I-2. Am I right on that?
That is correct.
All right, thank you. And then just a separate point, even I don't mean to say that the original city zoning won't matter, but I'm going to say the original city zoning will not be the standards that this property will be developed by if this property is added to the PAD. It will be the PAD standards. But going back to the original city zoning, is it not a fair point to say that under county, and I'll draw on your incredible depth of knowledge on county zoning, Ms. Sylvan, because it's far deeper than mine. Is it not fair to say that the county, it's called their general industrial zoning? My way of looking at it is that's not really a complete matchup with what the city calls heavy industrial zoning. And I guess my only question to you is, would there be any effect or impact on the applicant if the original city zoning is I-1 and then the PAD is presented and adopted? Is there any impact on the applicant at all if the translation zoning is I-1 zoning?
Mr. Urino, there is not.
Thank you very much. If you could go ahead then with your answers to the questions on the traffic flow, that would be good. And then Ms. Sylvan, you had another point, which I'm a good listener, but I didn't retain the other point you're going to address.
Yes, it's the one in the chat about the buffer to Hanson Ridge, which actually.
There you go.
So I am going to grab a plan. Well, that worked really well. Hold on. Sorry.
It's quite all right. Take your time.
All right, I'll take a moment just to discuss traffic, both existing conditions and what we anticipate for proposed conditions. So this, you can see the heavy black lines on the southwest part of the site. That's Interstate 10, of course. And then the western boundary of the H2K PAD consists of Houghton Road. Houghton Road has been recently improved, and if I'm sure many of you have driven it, there is a recently improved traffic interchange at that location. So at this point, we're anticipating that the primary access would likely be from Houghton, because that is the best transportation corridor available at this time. And then, of course, the eastern boundary of the site is formed by Colossal Cave. The traffic interchange there has not recently been improved, so we're aware that it is aging. It's likely that we're anticipating that secondary access would be Colossal Cave Road. And again, to stress the point that if the development is causing or requiring improvements to surrounding roadways, that will be borne out of the traffic analysis. And of course, a traffic analysis is prepared or conducted and prepared by a professional traffic engineer. So they analyze the site and anticipate the amount of traffic volume that would be generated by it, and look at existing capacities and conditions of existing roads and improvements. If they are required to facilitate safe and efficient access to the site, they will be contained within that traffic report. It's also likely that some of the issues being described are areas around the Acacia Elementary School, area to the north that you can see where Colossal Cave crosses the railroad. We're aware that there are at-grade railroad crossings there, and when the trains do come through, we understand that they do block traffic. So that we understand. It's most likely that users of this site will be using Interstate 10, which is one of the reasons why it makes it attractive, is because of that transportation corridor. So the focus is probably that yellow symbol that you see there on Colossal Cave. That is showing you generally, Carrie's pointing it out. That's the area generally where we anticipate an access point into the site. So improvements will be focused from that point to I-10 primarily, and not really to the Charter Sisters Road. I'll just point it out also, Carrie pointed that out as well. An existing roadway that serves as access to the Hanson Ridge subdivisions, in that stair step path, curves through the buffer area that we've established and connects with Colossal Cave Road. That is the area that's being discussed with regard to school-age children walking. That roadway will remain. The industrial uses are not planned to connect to that. If there are commercial uses developed in that area, of course, they would access that roadway. That's the general overview of how the existing and proposed transportation and how we anticipate it probably occurring.
And Mr. Longacre, did I understand you earlier to say, and then again just now in a more shortened version, that there are no users identified yet who will build on this property, but that as development is planned, there will be detailed traffic studies to deal with whatever development is then proposed and planned?
That's
correct.
Thank you.
And then,
Ms. Sylvan, Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
The chat comment, Mr. Josh Connors, he was asking if we had reached out to the developers of Hanson Ridge subdivision. I did get a call, and forgive me, I don't have her name, I have it in my records. Some months ago, I got a call from somebody from the title company with regard to the project. And if people aren't aware, before lots were sold in the subdivision, they were held by a title company. There was a woman that called me, and she asked me questions about what was planned on the property. She asked me about the Julian Wash buffer. We discussed the existence of the buffer, how it was intended to be preserved and enhanced. We discussed to some degree the width of that buffer area. So she is aware of what we're planning, was satisfied with the information that we received. I'm happy to dig her name out of my files if you'd like me to provide it to you.
And I'd like to just highlight, if I can, for a minute on this plan, it shows the buffer, because I think the meat of that question was, there's buffers around Cactus RV, there's buffers around Acacia, what about Hanson Ridge? So there's actually, this Julian Wash corridor is a very natural buffer to the Hanson Ridge various locks that range, and keep in mind, what we did was we extended what we call the Acacia, right, use and height buffer, but we went ahead and extended that to the north to capture this area. So this buffer ranges, it's going to be a completely natural buffer from the lowest area, which is 350 feet, all the way up to 2,000 feet. Obviously, it follows the edge of that buffer. So that was actually established, again, as part of the original H2K. PAD, the Cody is the only area that's being annexed that we needed to add, and we again also extended that additional height and use buffer, and then the J area up here, which is further away from Hanson Ridge.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to say anything else?
Mr. Urino, if there's anything else that you would like us to address, we'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, we think we've addressed everything.
I appreciate it, and I want to thank everyone in the audience who participated. I'm going to close the public hearing on both case TPENT 0124000003, Cody, Gabriel, and J Annexation District, Original City Zoning, and TPMOD 0623000018, H2K PAD Major Amendment. Everyone have a safe and lovely evening. Good night.
Thank you.